Is this you? Trapped in a hamster wheel, trying to make a good thumbnail but you can't seem to figure it out? Let me break you out with this free thumbnail guide for beginners and intermediates. We'll go over which software to use and how to use the most important tools, masking, effects, filters, overlays, the ATC thumbnail principle, how to use text correctly, because most people actually make their thumbnails worse. I'll also show you the 21 different thumbnail types that you can copy, and after that we'll create a thumbnail together step by step. Real quick, I just want to mention that I made a free asset pack with over 50 backgrounds, overlays, textures, arrows, and text presets. It's in the description for you to download, and I think it can help you out a lot. There will be timestamps for every chapter, so feel free to skip around. However, there are always some methods that are faster or better, so you might learn something new even if you already know a tool. But let's get started. As you can see, we got a lot on our list today. As for software, you should use photopea or Photoshop. Photoshop costs a bit. Photopea is completely for free and it works in any browser. Also looks exactly the same as Photoshop, so if we just compare the tools, like all of these tools are also over here, so you can basically follow along anything in this video with photopea. So let's first get familiar with the tools. By the way, any keys that I press will be on the screen right here, so I don't have to say the shortcuts for them every single time. First of all, we got the brush tool. With it, you can draw, and over here you can also switch it to the pencil tool. If you Alt and right click, you can drag to adjust the size of the brush that you want. And obviously there's colors up there, so you can do whatever you want with that. So once you do anything, you can press V to select it. You can Control C copy it, Control V paste it, Control T. Why is it not showing anymore? That's annoying. Control T to transform, and you can then scale it up and down. If you wanted to change the aspect ratio, you can press Control to move it however you want, or you can also press Shift to only change these X and Y axes, whatever one you drag around. If you press E, there's the eraser. Oh, now it's showing again. And with it, you can erase stuff. Now, there are many tools to select different things. So if we start out with the lasso tool, you can draw around this and then drag it around. You can also use the marquee tool, which basically can draw a rectangle, it can draw a circle, rows. Then there's the magic wand tool, which basically selects anything of a color. So this black part is now selected. We can press Shift and click on another one to also select this one and also this one. So then we could also cut it out. Here's also the quick selection tools. So if we draw over this, it's gonna select this part pretty accurately. You can then also make this smaller again and add some stuff. So that way we can cut the palm tree out if we wanted to. Now the object selection tool, we'll just click on this. This one takes a while, so I usually don't use it. There we go. If we now hover over things, we can, for example, select Sonic over here. And then we can cut him out. So it works really well, but it takes a while. Then there's also the select subject button, which I don't know if it works on Sonic. Yeah, no, it didn't. And the remove background, which also usually only works on people. We can use the remove background on this one, for example. It should be pretty perfect, yeah. Alright, so if we wanted to get rid of this rock thing, we can press J, make it a bit bigger, and just draw over this, and it's gonna be gone. That's called the spot healing brush tool. And there's a few other ones, like the remove tool. For example, we could remove this palm tree. So, there we go, and it's gone. And then I guess do a bit of cleanup here. The healing brush tool is also quite interesting. You can Alt click on something and then you can basically draw from that part that you sampled. There's a blur tool. Let's blur out the palm tree that I added again. It should be pretty visible. Then there's a sharpen tool. Let's just sharpen Sonic. If you do it too much, then this is gonna start happening. By the way, this is how most of these memes are made. You just over sharpen something. Then with G, there's the fill bucket tool, which basically like fills in the color that you click on. Then there's also the gradient tool over here, which there are a lot of like presets. We can, for example, use, I don't know, this color. If we click on OK, and now just drag somewhere to somewhere, we're gonna have this. There's different modes, and depending on how much you draw this around, like the bigger it's gonna be. If you press U, you're gonna get like a rectangle tool. So you can change the filter whatever you want. Sure, let's just do this. You can add a stroke, you can remove the stroke if you want to, you can have different lines for the stroke, all that kind of stuff. If you drag around this thing, then you're gonna change how like sharp the edges are. And obviously you can also draw circles and all that other stuff. I try to go this as fast as possible while still it being like somewhat understandable. You'll get used to the tools over time. This might seem a bit confusing if you just picked up photopea or Photoshop, but you'll probably have most of the stuff down by the end of this video. For example, you could just try to replicate this real quick and then you already have some practice in. Oh, by the way, there's the text tool, but we'll talk about text later because it's very important and there's other things that I need to mention first for the text to actually make sense. So let's talk a bit about masking. This is already a mask. If you see this like black and white thing over here, if we remove this, then the background is going to be back. And if we click on this thing, this is a mask, and then draw with black on something, then it's going to remove that from the mask. But let's remove the mask again and select this with the magic wand tool. So we'll increase the tolerance by a bit, so around 20. There we go. We can see that some things are selected. We can then invert the selection and press this tool to also have the mask effect. In this case, we really could have just clicked on remove background, but I want to show you like different options on how to do things because sometimes you will need them. Now, if I scale this down by a lot and then I scale it up by a lot again, it's going to be really blurry. And if we want to avoid that, we can right click this and convert it to a smart object. Basically, this means that we can move it around as much as we want and it's going to stay the same quality because the image is basically saved in another file, if I can explain it like that. This also gets us to the next part, which is filters. If we use, for example, the liquify tool on this, we can make his eyes bigger, for example, and mouth smaller, just because. If we click on OK for this one, it's going to be added as a smart filter, so we can just toggle this on and off. If I didn't convert this to a smart object, then this would have been a so-called destructive edit, meaning I can't undo this later on. We can actually just try that on this one, for example. I'm not going to make this a smart object, we'll just scale it down anyway. Filter liquify, so we'll make his eyes bigger by just clicking and his mouth smaller again. And now we can't toggle this on or off, so if we do any other change, for example, we move it around, to now undo the liquefying, we'll have to undo 2 steps. So that's why you should always use smart filters. Let's try to actually make somewhat of a thumbnail out of this. We'll just keep this smart filter on because it's funny. So what I'm going to do is add a camera raw filter onto this, and we'll change some colors in Mr. Beast's face. Because on thumbnails, everything is a bit more bright and contrasty. You probably have noticed that already. So we can turn up the exposure to make him brighter. We can turn up the contrast to distinguish more between his face and his dark hoodie. Highlights is basically like increasing or decreasing the white parts. Shadows, yeah, it's the shadows. Whites, blacks is a similar thing, but usually you just test around and see what happens. The temperature is basically how yellow or how blue something is. If we select with this white balance tool, if we select a white part, then it's automatically going to adjust this. So it said that temperature needs to go up by 1 and tint up by 4, but obviously we can also change it by hand. Vibrance is always something I just put on there. Saturation, sometimes it might mess up like skin color, as you can see right there. That's some Willy Wonka shit. Texture is really just texture. You can make it a bit blurry and you can over texture it. Usually I turn it up by a bit. Let me not go through every single other option for now, but you can just test around with it and have some fun. So for now, let's click on OK. And we can see that from this color to this color, it's already a big difference. We can also still toggle this camera raw filter on and off. What happened to his nose? I actually can't explain what just happened with that. No idea. Alright, but let's move him over here. Now we can add a drop shadow with this effects thing down in the bottom. Blending options, drop shadow. Let's not make the size that big, but something like this maybe. Let's add some spread to make it even darker. You can adjust color, all that. Let's just click on OK for now. And he's a bit more distinguished from the background. Let's make this a smart object and scale it up. And let's also invert the width by just typing a minus over here. And then we have Mr. Beast and Sonic in one picture. Just remove the sunflower. For that we have to rasterize the smart object, which basically means it gets destructed a little bit. Wait, no, we don't. We don't need to. Because we can add a new layer on top of this one and then use the spot healing brush tool and click on sample all layers. So we can actually still use this. I actually learned this yesterday. Wow, that didn't work. And that way we don't have to remove the smart object. And there we go. Let's just use a few other filters that might come in handy for you. So we'll just select basically everything of this blue part behind him. So if we have this selected, we can go to filter, blur, and then Gaussian blur. That way we can blur the background. This is honestly a very bad example. Let's just select the grass over here. Use it on this one. There we go. But what we also might want to do is select the Sonic. Again, this is only a quick example. And then select the background, go to blur and go to motion blur. We can then adjust the angle and make it look like Sonic is running really fast down the hill. Obviously, we should probably delete this part from the Sonic layer. Something like that. A few other effects, we can add noise. It just makes everything look a bit more grainy. Sometimes it's really good to have some texture in there, and that's how you can add it. If down here we click on, for example, vibrance, we can drag it above Mr. Beast, and if we now adjust it, everything in the picture is gonna get more vibrant or less vibrant, depending on how we do it. Now, if we only want to apply this to Mr. Beast, we press Alt and then click on his layer. So now the background is not affected by this. But what I really wanted to do is make Sonic stand out more, so we'll put it on the Sonic layer and increase the vibrance a bit. You can also put exposure on here, also bind it again, change that up how you want to. One of my favorite things to do is changing colors. So if we add a hue and saturation, bind it to Mr. Beast, and then use this tool over here to select the color of his hoodie, we can then increase and decrease the saturation. But let's get a more clearer example of this. So let's bind hue and saturation to the bottom layer, select green, and then change that to red or yellow. That's pretty much it for filters. There are a lot more, and there are a lot more down here, but this is still supposed to be a beginner tutorial, so we'll keep it at this for now. Now let's make it look like Sonic is running in a thunderbolt. We can do that with overlays. Thunderbolt overlay. We can just do that and choose any of these with a black background. So we can copy this, paste that in there, and then we change the blending mode to screen. That way everything that is black is gonna get removed. We can adjust it a bit like that, and there you go. It looks like he's struck by lightning. Let's also add some particles overlay, basically just to show you that this is possible. I'll show you a really good example of how you can use particles in a second. There we go, we have some particles on here, amazing. Because in the thumbnail for this thumbnail guide, I used a lot of particles. I mean, we can scroll through the layers a bit, and you can see that there's quite a few effects on there. So for example, I use these particles and these ones, and I'll show you how to do that. So we'll copy this over, and initially when you find something like this on the internet, it's gonna look like this. The first step is to select it and put it on screen mode because it's a black background. Second step is to click on this mask layer mask, sorry. And the third step is to press Alt and Delete to fill it all with black. Or we can also do Ctrl I to invert, or we can use the bucket filter to fill it black. Either way, you can now choose a brush, put the color on white, and make sure you have this selected, not this one. And then you can take your brush and draw in particles over here. You can kind of see them. That's how that works. Wow, we already did a lot, but there's a lot more to be done. Thumbnail principles. The thumbnail principle that we'll be working with is called ATC, and we'll go over each one. A stands for attention. When you upload a video with a thumbnail, it's gonna show up on the home screen. Now there are a lot of videos with a lot of thumbnails. So the first thing you need to make sure is that your thumbnail catches someone's attention. This one, for example, is very vibrant. This one over here is also very vibrant and very saturated. This one stands out because it looks more like a casual situation. And if we scroll down, this is just a guy looking into a camera. And if we scroll down even further, let's see what we have. We have contrast between this beige and red tone. We have huge text, and we have an unexpected image because who would expect a green bathroom? That's all for getting the viewer to stop their scrolling and just even have a look at your thumbnail. Now T stands for trust. This guy, for example, Ryan Horgan Unfiltered, no one knows him, but he's using Hamza on his thumbnail to get trust, because Hamza is a well-known YouTuber and many people associate good content with Hamza. That way, if he uses him on his thumbnail, it's gonna work really well. Over here we have Kanye, also a well-known person. So you can use bigger creators, for example, or you could even use, for example, this kind of thing. When you see this thumbnail, you're also gonna feel some trust because he's previewing a story formula with 3 different steps. So you know that he thought about this concept and he has 3 different steps, and you trust that these steps are probably gonna be good. Another way is just branding. Colin and Samir's podcast is literally a perfect example because they always use this yellow square and a dark background and one person on the side. And if you see these thumbnails, you're gonna think, oh, Colin and Samir, I like their previous videos, so I'm gonna click on this one again. C, probably the most important one out of all of them. Actually, no, I can't say that, but very important. Doesn't work without it. Curiosity. How do we define this? The full story of Mr. Beast, almost 2 hours. MrBeast is one of the largest creators on the platform, so by definition, you're probably going to be curious how his life is like if you watch any of his previous videos. We interviewed a YouTube employee about why videos go viral. As a creator, you're going to be curious why videos go viral and what you can learn from them. This is a Minecraft city with a huge picture. You're going to think, how is that a Minecraft city? That looks like a hill. That would be a huge city. Over here, confidence is uncomfortable. Why would confidence be uncomfortable? It's counterintuitive, so it makes you curious. In the description, you're going to find a link to a thumbnail cheat sheet that further explains some different examples of attention, trust, and curiosity. Now, 3 different rules that I just kind of have to state. First of all, you're going to use at maximum 3 elements. This one, for example, text, ball, line, right side, left side text, person text. I don't speak the language, so I can't be sure, but I would assume that this is too much. Too much text, too many different things. This is too much. There we go. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different elements. No one's gonna look at that fast. Putting a new in here and these different YouTube logos and then another thing down here with another grow text, that really just doesn't make sense. Don't restate the title. Let's get an example from my Miro board, where I basically have some thumbnail inspiration over here. How to get ahead of 99% of people in 6 to 12 months. If you wrote the same thing on the thumbnail, it wouldn't have helped anything at all. You already have the title and people are going to read the title. So the thumbnail needs to complement the title. Danko in this case said, create an anti-vision on his thumbnail. This kind of answers how to get ahead of 99% of people, but it opens up a new loop, a new so-called curiosity gap that people now want to know what's an anti-vision and how can it help me. Packaging should fit content. This one's pretty obvious. If I say I survived 7 days in an abandoned city, I can't just be quitting at day 1. If I say face your biggest fear to win $800,000, I can't just give away $80,000. If someone clicks on your video and they get disappointed, that's the worst thing that can happen. 21 thumbnail types. This is from the video top 21 thumbnail formats to grow on YouTube fast. So credit to this guy. We'll actually have to speedrun this. You can use a shocking thumbnail. You can use large numbers on your thumbnail. You can add a reaction because humans are actually like a very good thing to put on thumbnails, simply because it makes things more relatable and people know what to expect in the video. Quotes. This one is a bad example, I can't lie. Colin and Samir. If this flops, I'm done. That's a perfect quote to put on a thumbnail. Questions. But what happens to me? Putting the opposite of what someone thinks on the thumbnail. Can you fix climate change? No. People would expect kurz gesagt to say, yes, you can. But they just say no. With a star because they talk about how we together can probably fix it, but anyway. Discord and chat messages. This is really interesting. Beluga popped up with this format, and it's just a way to make funny thumbnails, and people might click on them. Branded, we talked about that. Social hacking, putting a celebrity or a well-known person, we talked about that as well. Saturation is really good for attention grabbing. Headers, and this kind of thing to show how extreme something is. We have weird objects, or in general weird pictures, we talked about that. Ambiguity, basically people want to know how this MrBeast play button looks like by it being pixeled out. Showing a transformation, there's a lot of these dopamine detox before and after. If we just scroll down a few here, before, after, 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 before, after. It works really well. Comparison, I guess that's also before, after. You can do time lapses, bring alongs, you can sometimes do cutouts. Don't do this for now because only bigger creators can get away with it. And then single photos. We actually saw quite a few when we scrolled through YouTube a minute earlier. Here, single photo, single photo. I guess this is a header, single photo. Okay, now text. This is one of the most important things there is to thumbnail creation. It's, by the way, also why I think this thumbnail even turned out well in the first place. If I remove the text, it's gonna be very empty. And this glow on the text makes it so much better. So I'll show you how to make good text. First of all, press T on your keyboard and just click anywhere and just type anything. Then pick a font. There are a lot of fonts on here. Personally, I like using Gotham. I downloaded that from the web. Eras, Bold, ITC, and Cubano. Those are my main fonts. I do recommend you to go onto defont.com and then finding a new font that you don't see many people use. That way you can really stand out. For example, using this Demon Panic thing. I actually downloaded this a while ago. Demon Panic. Using something like that, you're gonna be so unique. We just, I don't know, type scary and scale that up. Okay, the font isn't as good as it looks on here. Anyway, let's go with Gotham. Let's just say MrBeast did a money giveaway for the best Sonic player or something like that. and we'll put the $1,000 text on here. First of all, obviously you should change the color. And then there are a lot of effects we can put on this. If you go to blending options, you're going to have bevel and emboss, which adds this 3D effect. Usually I wouldn't recommend adding it, but it is an option. What you probably always want to do, especially as a beginner, is just add some drop shadow on it. It will help out so much because it's very important that the text doesn't blend in with the background. Put this on a blue tone and then remove the effect. No one's going to be able to read that from afar. You can also use Canva complementary colors. They have a really good website here. If you now put in this blue tone, I'm just going to guess it. You can also copy over the code. We can see that this color is the opposite of it. So if we put that in here and then adjust it a bit, yep, this is really good for contrast. Let's double click on effects again and add a gradient overlay instead. So we will go to oranges, for example. Since it's still somewhat close to yellows, we can just test out different things. That might look good. Or we go over to green because this is a money thumbnail. So it really just makes sense. And as always, I would really just recommend you to play around with the different settings and see what you can do. If we double click on this, we can change the colors. So for example, we can make it darker if we wanted to and make it brighter over here. We can adjust this thing, or we could also add something in between, but let's not do that now. What I also like to do is sometimes adding a white drop shadow with a dark one on top. This can work really well, but sometimes it doesn't. But let's try to get this one to glow. So we'll increase the opacity of this one, decrease the size, and then we'll actually duplicate the text, Alt drag above. Here I'm gonna remove the drop shadow and turn this into a rasterized layer. And now on this we can actually add a Gaussian blur. Something like that. And we can decrease the opacity a bit. And now we have the text a lot more glowy. Let's add another layer below the text because I removed the dark drop shadow, but we'll add it by hand. So I'm gonna use a brush tool, black, and just paint under it. Something like that. And we can change this to a soft light. That way it's gonna be darker over here. We could also just decrease the opacity, like so. And then we already have the text popping out a bit more. If we double click on this again, we can also add a stroke. So for example, something like this could work. So that's one style that you can do. Let's just delete it and type like day 5. Put this on white. Add a stroke. Bam. Scale up. Put it into the corner. And then we kind of have a text like on this thumbnail over here. Now let's say you have a text that doesn't fit on the screen. Instead of scaling it down, you can actually try to press Shift and just drag this together. In this case, it looks really goofy, but it is an option. Another thing you can do is select the text and turn down the space between the letters. That way they're also going to be like more together. Or you can just change it to a different font. That also works. So now here's my thumbnail workflow. Step 1 is to get a lot of inspiration. Go on YouTube and just screenshot good thumbnails. I would recommend you to get the 1 of 10 extension because this will add a small indicator over here, this 18 times thing that shows you how many times more views a video got compared to the channel average. So this one, for example, is a so-called outlier. And now you just want to screenshot good thumbnails that you find. And titles, of course. I'm actually going to scroll a bit till I find something really good. This one is really good, but I have no idea how I would ever apply that to my own channel, so I'm not going to screenshot that. This one is interesting. Are you just going to take that and then yes in the title? This is kind of the unexpected thing we talked about earlier. And then you just add it to a Miro board or anything you want to. Now I have a lot of these things, so I have many videos that I can do. I can literally just zoom into anything, but let's do this one. The title is How to Unfuck Your Life, and I'm gonna make a thumbnail for how to unfuck your thumbnails. So we have a before and an after, 2 sides, 2 texts. These 2 characters are cut out, and this is the title. Let's just try to do that with our Sonic theme here. Search up Sonic Sad, go to Images, copy one over into Photoshop. I chose this one. Sonic Happy PNG. This one, for example, is transparent, so I could copy over this one. But I already chose tooth, so this is what we're gonna work with. First of all, remove the background. I'm gonna use the magic wand tool for this one and just select the color. Over here it didn't work. I'm gonna have to reduce the tolerance and continue like so. Then you just press on this clipping mask and you're gonna have a nicely cut out Sonic. Now over here I'm gonna select the clipping mask and actually draw in with white this part because that one didn't get selected properly. That's how you can fix things. Let me choose the pencil tool and also draw in this outline part. Next we press U and just draw a rectangle up here. Something like that. Just put this one white. Was it also white over here? No, there was no rectangle. I'm gonna use a rectangle. And then T to get some text in. I already made this. I don't know if you saw it already, but before and after is really just scaled down and put into the places. So now we need to think about how we're gonna make this look very interesting. The title is gonna be how to unfuck your thumbnails, so we kind of need to portray that in the thumbnail. One very popular option is adding graphs. First of all though, let's make a nice background. We can just use any like dark image, or we can use a gradient. Let's use a gradient. And then choose like a gray tone over here and 2 blacks on the sides. Click on OK. And then we can just draw that one in. It's probably not what I'm gonna go with like in the end, but we can use it for now. By the way, I put up this guide by dragging on the ruler on the side and then just dragging it into the middle. And using this, we can make another rectangle, press U, something like that, and have like a middle part. I'm not quite happy with the background, so we're gonna use this one that I used on another thumbnail. Let me remove those two. So this is how I downloaded it from Google. And then we're gonna add exposure, bind that to the layer, decrease the exposure so that Sonic in the foreground, which is the main focus, and the before and after is more in focus. And then also put on a hue and saturation. And we're gonna drag down the saturation a bit and drag down the lightness even further. Now let's add another layer on top. And here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna choose a red brush, or rather a red pen, and just draw in a graph like so. And just fill in the back. Then we're gonna select this part and just duplicate it. On the lower layer, we're gonna fill this in. We're now gonna switch to a brighter color and fill it in again. That way we have this effect so far. If we now decrease the opacity, it's gonna get more and more realistic, or not realistic, but rather look like a good graph. Then let's add some blending options. Add a drop shadow. No, not a white one, a dark one. Or we can try a red one. Yep, decrease the size, and then we have it nice and glowy. I'm also going to adjust this to a darker red, so the background now also looks a bit better. Let's just put this into a group, call this red graph, and do the same thing, but with green on the other side. Okay, I don't like this over here, so we're going to fix that by moving over the green graph so they kind of match up. Oh no. So here's where issues arise because I didn't use a smart object. Because this glow part is from the Gaussian blur, so we'll need to delete this one, fix this other layer first, and then duplicate it again. This time I'm gonna make it a smart object though, before I add the Gaussian blur. So we can always change it later on. Anyway, we got these two groups, red graph and green graph. And on top of this one, we're gonna use a layer mask, which I never did before, but it's gonna work. We're gonna use the marquee tool or something like that, and then press Alt Delete to cut that off. We can copy that over and invert the layer mask to get this effect. Control I for inverting. Okay, we're getting somewhere. This sad Sonic is not standing out enough. So what we're gonna do is add camera raw. Let's see, it's a bit too dark, so we're gonna add exposure. We don't need contrast on this one actually. Highlights down because I don't want this, okay, I can't show it. I don't want this upper part to get too bright, so we'll remove the highlights. Up the shadows, up the whites a bit, up the blacks a bit, add some more vibrance, some more saturation, because it's not a human, so it works. Texture, yes sir. Clarity, no. Dehaze, yep. We can also do this, boom, boom, to also make it look a bit nicer. Whew. That's a pretty good change, you have to admit. Now we can just test if copying this over works on the haptics. No, it doesn't. Okay, we have to do it again for the other Sonic. Alright, and then of course, when I make thumbnails, it can't be any different. I have to add some drop shadows. And we will copy this one over to that one as well. Now what I don't like is that the drop shadow is drop shadowing up here. So we're just gonna move that above the Sonic. But I still want the right Sonic to be above the rectangle for this to happen. This is good. Let's go to the background, make this a smart object and we're gonna choose motion blur to the side. Actually, it doesn't really matter. For this one, I thought because it's Sonic, you should do motion blur, but it's a background, so let's just use Gaussian. Doesn't really matter in this case. I'm not too happy with the brightness of this all. It might be because of the background. If I remove this, I don't know if this is better, to be honest. We can start using some particles. Let's actually add a new layer below the sad Sonic and get a dark blue brush, something like that, and add this to linear dodge add. Oh, this is tough because of the red graph. I wanted to make it blue because Sonic is blue, but we'll actually make it red because of the graph. Something like that should help. So if we only look at this layer, this is literally just what I drew. Let's copy this over and do the same thing for the happy Sonic. and also invert the width so that we have the cutoff side at the right side. Drag that over there. Add hue and saturation. Bam. Drag it until it's green. Bam. And that's that. I still don't like the middle part. So what we can try is go to my analytics and get one of these thingies. Except for we're gonna change the text with the inspect tool. By the way, yes, I am exposing myself. CTR. We're clickbaiting on this channel. Oh no. And this is gonna be changed to 18%. We'll remove that text. There we go, just screenshot that and put it into Photoshop. How do we make this work? Let's see if removing this middle rectangle helps. Let's make a rectangle thing with rounded corners and bind this layer to the bottom one, making it fit into the corners. That way we can customize it a bit easier, like so. Drop shadow on it, of course. Okay, I have an idea that might actually work. So I put the graphs into a group and then added a gradient fill. And with this gradient fill, if we bind it to the graphs, we can get something like this. So let's edit the gradient, a dark red, have this, a dark green, add a bright red over here, add a bright green right over here. What if we put both on 50? I feel like we can get away with that. So there we go, we made a halfway decent thumbnail. Usually I would spend a lot more time on this, but I really had to restrict it for this tutorial. So I really hope that this helped. And don't forget to click the link in the description to get many free assets.